Are you ready?
Hello, and welcome to the Whole House Podcast, where you can find home, health, and family all in one place. Our team is comprised of moms from different upbringings and backgrounds, and we each have different passions and giftings and strengths. We each represent a different room, and we all make up the whole house. So grab a cup of coffee and join our overly caffeinated ladies here for the Whole House Podcast. Hi, and welcome to the Whole House Podcast. We're here today. It's Carly,
Kathleen,
and Megan Wright.
And we're very, very excited to have Megan here with us. And we're just going to dive right into her story and just some things about her life. And we're very thrilled to bring them to you.
Yes,
I'm glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your homeschool journey.
Well, just a little bit about myself, too. My name's Megan. I've been married for 17 years now, and we have 2 children. My husband and I have 2 children. Lydia is 12, and Emma is 10. And we didn't always homeschool, and I'm not certain that we will always homeschool in the future. So the journey towards homeschooling in particular was, I was a stay-at-home mom when the girls were young, and I absolutely loved nurturing them, playing with them, doing preschool with them. And I desired to homeschool, but it just never happened. And so we took that plunge to homeschool when my daughter, my oldest, was transitioning from 4th to 5th grade, which in our area is moving to the middle school age. And we just felt like, I wanted to try it. I'm a teacher by trade, and I'm a teacher by giftings of the Holy Spirit. And so I wanted to be able to teach and spend more time together. And I know that that's an age where they need that pouring into and that nurturing. And so we just tried to give it a go. It was maybe a little atypical. It wasn't some word from God or anything like that. For me, it was really just a decision we made, and we followed through. And so we've been doing that for 3 years now, and it's been wonderful. I've loved it.
I'm going to interject something here because while Megan's girls were going to public school before she decided to homeschool, we called her the homeschooling public schooler because she would tell us all of these wonderful things that she was doing with her girls before they left for school in the morning. Yeah. All of the readers they were reading and what she would do art-wise and all these other things. So in our little circle of friends, we were calling her the homeschooling public schooler. We were just waiting for her to come to the revelation that she might want to try it.
Well, and I think that's because my philosophy has always been that we are our kids' primary teacher, regardless of where they go in their life. And so I think homeschooling in general, for me at least in my philosophy, is a lot about connection. And so though my girls were being educated outside of the home, I wanted to keep that connection strong. So I sought different ways and avenues to make sure that I was connected and that they would primarily see my voice as a voice of influence in their life, regardless of who else was teaching them and instructing them.
Right.
I like that. What did you do while Lydia was in school?
Well, when both of my girls were toddler age, I babysat in the home for one child. Okay. Probably 2 years with one child and then another 2 to 3 years with another child. So my girls had built-in playmates that kind of helped that way. I do remember when both of my girls were in school and I was a stay-at-home mom to no children. I mean, I definitely went through a bit of a crisis identity, crisis. It was very like, well, what do I do? It was amazing how fast that time vanished, like really. But there were a lot of things that just made me reevaluate who am I, what do I want to do to connect with my kids, what can I do to figure out who I am. But it was really also a blessing because during that time my mother was sick and died, and just a lot of things happened in my personal life, and I had a lot of space to deal with them, which probably made me part of who I am now. So the journey to not homeschooling when they were young, honestly, I think is God's timing because I don't believe I would have done it the same way that I'm doing it now had I always traveled that way.
Well, and we've talked a little bit lately about like some women do have that identity crisis after they're done homeschooling for, say,
21 years.
Yeah. 21 years.
Like me.
Yes. So I think that may be like really valuable in your post homeschooling life, like when your girls are grown, that you won't maybe won't have to go through that as drastically.
Well, I think sometimes we as women condemn ourselves for feeling like we're lost. And I don't think we should at all, because we all go through so many seasons. And if we don't learn the first time we encounter that, or the second time we encounter it, because we're going to encounter it a lot, if we don't learn how to treat ourselves well and give our space to deal with the new season of life, then I think we have a lot of expectations of ourselves that will probably fall short.
Right. When I was struggling with that identity of leaving, knowing my homeschooling years were going to be over, a really good friend of mine who's also a counselor said that men's lives generally stay the same. They work. They work until they retire, and then they might have an identity crisis. But women's lives are constantly changing. We're constantly flowing into new seasons and new identities, because we have infants and then toddlers, then school age, and everything is constantly changing. Yeah. So I think that we do have more of those forks in the road where we need to decide, what are we going to do with that time, or what door is God going to open for me next? And so you've had a lot of experience in that, and I'm glad that you're saying that it's okay to have compassion for yourself and to take some time and do whatever needs to be done, grieving for your mother or those sorts of things.
Yeah. And I just think a lot of times that women in general just don't recognize that season till it's upon them, and they know something's not right and they can't identify it. So if we can, and you can't compare your journey to somebody else's, and oh goodness, we all try to do that too. So
I was listening to another podcast, and they were specifically talking about seasons, and they talked about when they first heard that term used to describe different phases of your life. And one of the girls brought up, she said something like, it's funny how some seasons we fight so hard to stay where we were, and then some seasons we're like willing to jump right in.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Sure.
So your husband Justin is a pastor.
Yes, he is.
And personally, we're pretty good friends with you guys. So I've known you guys for a long time. And could you tell us a little bit about how homeschooling and Justin's career, how those kind of interact, and your marriage? And
well, I think it's an interesting thing, and this is where it may be very different than other women who are homeschoolers. I identify myself as Megan first, and then a lot of the other roles and titles. Like, do not be surprised if someone would hear this and know, I didn't know you homeschooled, because it's really not the first thing I share about who I am. I don't find my identity primarily in the fact that I am a homeschooler, though it takes up, obviously, quite a few hours of my day and all that. I don't tend to find my identity there. So there are lots of people in our church that probably do not know that we homeschool. So don't be surprised at that fact. But it's really been free for us. Justin and I run the marriage ministry at our church. And one of the things that is a rock bed of what we do is that we meet with couples, and we call it mentoring. And so homeschooling has been really good for that, because our girls are at an age where they can do some independent work, and I can either assign them things. They can come while I'm meeting with a couple. So there's just been a freedom in ministry, because I would hate to give up my evenings with my children to do the ministry that I do. And now I feel like I'm well connected, that when I'm doing the ministry I feel led and called to do, I feel like there's still enough connection and time together that I don't feel like it's a big gaping hole that I have to choose ministry or my kids, or ministry at the deficit of my kids. And I feel like it's been a fit for our family for that reason.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Because if they're gone all day at school, and
I
you're
would
not with
give
them,
up evenings.
right, then you would feel like you needed to spend every minute of the evening with them.
Right.
And I'm sure you feel like there's some value with teaching your girls, the way you're investing in people's lives.
Yeah.
They get to be there for that.
Well, and I think that's something I learned from my mother, was just learning to minister by invitation. Like, I think I would sum up my mom's life in that she invited me to be a part of the things that she was passionate about. And I feel like part of that just became part of my DNA as a mother. Like, my girls are just invited to the things that I'm passionate about and that I care about. And that's just how we serve each other as a family.
Right. And that's a great legacy, because that's the way my mother was. And to serve with her meant that you got to go count bread and at the food pantry and prepare boxes for people coming in, and it just becomes part of your lifestyle. And like you said, it's part of your DNA. And so you just naturally do that. Yeah. And I think it's very important for our children to see us ministering to other people and to have a vision and to have a goal, because one of the traps of homeschooling is sometimes we get our identity there, and then our children begin to see us not as a person, but as this, mom constantly. Why didn't you do this for me? Why isn't, those kinds of things. And I can remember telling my kids sometimes, even though I was doing other things, I can still see myself saying, I'm a human being. Yeah. I'm a human being too. I have other things that I need to do too, and I have feelings and those sorts of things. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's a good thing to pass on to our children, to pass into their DNA, their spiritual DNA, is that we serve because Jesus loves us, and because he loves us and served us, we serve other people, and then they will just do that naturally as they grow up.
Something you guys were saying about finding your identity in things you do. It's like intellectually we all know that we shouldn't do that. But I mean, would you say there is a time in your life where you've been identified by I have a toddler, so like definitely when he was a baby, like I was identified by Judah's mom. Like people came to see him before they came to see me.
Yeah, so. I remember that saying that to you. We're not here to see you anymore. We're here to see
just here to see Judah. But like that is something. It's something I feel like women have to fight because there are so many things that we're expected or we want to do that it is hard to remember that.
Or sometimes we get put in a box. I just met someone the other day, and she had heard a little bit of my story, and the first thing she asked me was like, oh, wait, you're not homeschooling anymore, so you don't have anything to do all day? Like, I was certain, I was automatically put in a box that, okay, that
now you're
part...
like a retired mom.
Right.
And I think sometimes... we probably have all maybe been guilty of putting somebody in a box. Like, let's be honest about that. Let's call it what it is. But I think part of that probably comes from our own insecurities. Like, oh, if you're not that, then you possibly couldn't have had something valid to offer to me or do. Or, and I think sometimes it's our own insecurities that we voice out loud to a person who's an innocent bystander that we're not actually allowing to be who they are. And that's definitely something I would think is what propagates those kinds of conversations from happening, because there's an insecurity that triggers for them, and so they voice it on you.
So back to the fact that you and Justin run a marriage ministry, what are 2 things that homeschool moms could do to keep their marriage first when it feels as if homeschooling consumes your day?
Well, I think that we already even mentioned that finding your identity not in the fact. Like, if homeschooling is consuming every aspect of your day on a long-term basis, then I think that's probably something is askew.
Unhealthy.
Something has crossed the boundary of being unhealthy, and you probably need to talk to some friends and find some community that can help you say, okay, if it is truly consuming everything of your day, then let's talk about that. I'm sure you've run across that, Kathleen, in your years. People who are, maybe we could tweak some things there.
Maybe you could do some self-care. Maybe you can go out on a date with your husband. Maybe you can, because family's telling me, well, sometimes we're homeschooling until 9 p.m. at night, or sometimes we're, they're spending their whole day consumed by it. And it's, it's dangerous, actually. It's very dangerous because I have experience with, I've seen a couple marriages break up over it, especially moms who have, like me, 7 children or 9 children, even more, who homeschooled for years and years and years, and her whole life was consumed by that. Yeah. And then suddenly she hit her mid-40s and she just left.
Yeah.
I know of at least 2 cases, probably more if I really thought about it. But yeah, it's dangerous because you need to be feeding your marriage and feeding other parts of your soul so you're not just the giver, because when you are a homeschooling mom, especially if you have like me having 7 children, then it can be all consuming if you're not careful.
Yeah. And I can imagine that's what I would get at. Like if you're losing yourself to this task or this duty, even if you feel called to do it and that you believe that this is right and good, if you're losing yourself and your personal identity to any one thing, that's not as God would have it. We are to, sacrifice is absolutely a tenet of the Christian faith, but God desires obedience over sacrifice, and there are so many other aspects of our lives that we are to obey, and this one aspect should never overshadow all the other things. So when it comes to being a wife, for most homeschooling families, but not all, many of them, you're going to have been married before you were a homeschooler. You're going to be married, hopefully. It's my prayer and my desire that you be married after you homeschool. So there's a season, and it might be longer the more kids you have, obviously. Right. Yeah. But you can't really push pause on who you are as a person, who God created you as an individual to be, and you can't push pause on your marriage
and then be married. Yeah,
right. I think we have this philosophy I see so much, and it's probably part of my story and why I'm passionate about marriages. I saw a lot of relationships and my own parents walking a parallel path rather than one that was growing together. It was just parallel. They were good partners. They got the things done, but their lives were focused on things that weren't the two of them. And I see that a lot, that we're just, we're business partners, we're getting the job done, but they're not growing closer. And that's not the way God designed marriage at all, at all. And so focusing on that is something.
Yeah. So you are the person who got me into the Enneagram, and we are the same type 2, the helper. Maybe I'm an unhealthy 2 right now, but I am so inclined to over-help at the detriment of my own needs. So how do you fight that tendency?
Yes, for both of us.
Yes.
For all of us here, help us.
The giver, the person who exudes and encourages and will give to a deficit. I think for me, the road towards health and understanding my giving attitude and my servanthood, if you would, is that it's a beautiful part of my story. Mm-hmm. But along with many of us who are givers, the ugly underside of that is that there's often or can easily be a manipulative side to it. And for me, a lot of times those goes back to holes that you didn't know you had. Right. And that you didn't know you were trying to fill by wanting something from giving to all these people. Because not only do people who are givers and sacrificers, not only are they willing to give, and sometimes they can fool themselves into believing they don't want anything in to return. And sometimes on their healthiest day, they don't even want anything in return. But a lot of with that comes this side of just, is anyone going to notice that I need help? And am I even willing to ask for help? And I think that was honestly, you asked for 2 things that I could encourage homeschool moms and wives with. And my second thing would be learning how to clarify expectations. When you're feeling overwhelmed, that is something that my husband and I see regularly. We use a survey for couples who will come see us called Prepare Enrich, and it goes through a whole bunch of questions and a whole bunch of categories that gives you areas that you're already strong in and what we would call growth areas that you can grow. It is rare that we don't have a couple who is struggling with the area of communication and conflict resolution. And one of the things I would say is particularly difficult in homeschooling situations and the marriages there are that you'll come into the marriage and what kind of expectations, ladies, do we have of one another? A lot of them are
very unrealistic ones.
Unrealistic, and a lot of them are unspoken.
Yes, definitely.
Some of them are just unconscious. We don't even know. This is the way I dreamed of being a mom. I dreamed of being a wife. I dreamed of these things for so long, and you've never even thought through significantly what is it that I'm expecting of myself, of somebody else. And so learning to clarify expectations, I think, in marriages, regardless of homeschooling, is important. Learning to do it in friendships and all those kinds of things. And so our goal for communicating expectations is that they are conscious. You actually know what they are. Because I have talked to a number of people, and I myself have felt that. My husband will say, what is it? I'll be an emotional wreck, because number twos are very heart driven, and we can be very emotional. And he'll say, what is it you need? And I don't know. I know I need something, and I don't. Have you ever felt that?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. I don't know what I need, because there are unconscious expectations I'm having of somebody or something or myself going on. So learning to say, what is it I value? What is it I want? That kind of stuff is important. So making your expectations conscious, speaking them is going to be hard for some people.
Yes.
Other people might overspeak their expectations. They have to be realistic. And here's the clincher. You want to know the biggest key to expectations in relationships and marriage is that they have to be agreed upon. And that is a real sticking point in a lot of relationships. Because if I expect something of you, but you don't agree to actually fulfill that, then I'm thinking, what's wrong with you? And you're thinking, what's wrong with me? And you just immediately got this tension that is unhealthy and not good. So, and that can be hard to let go of something that you think is reasonable and good and right and spoken, and now you know it, but are you actually willing to do that?
Well, and those are good questions to ask, because I've asked those very same questions to my husband. Do you think that my expectation is reasonable?
Right.
Do you think that you could respect that expectation? Right. Do you think that you can follow through with that expectation? Right. And then I have to tell him, listen, I'm not trying to be mean or pushy because of his personality. He's the administrator. He's used to being in charge. Right. He's used to everybody, hopping up when he says hop. So that's just his personality. Right. So when I finally come out of the woodwork and say, I need something, I expect something, then I ask him those questions, because his first response is, just because of his personality, not because he's doing anything wrong, is, I don't think that's reasonable.
Right.
And so I have learned, because for my health and for my sanity, for my emotional well-being and my spiritual well-being, then I need to keep pushing that, not pushing it, but asking those questions, clarifying. I'm not trying to be picky. I know you think I'm being emotional, but these are what I need right now.
Yeah.
And
that's hard when I'd say the number one difference between men and women on a broad scale is I'm an emotional thinker. My husband is a very logical, intellectual, logical thinker, and also just in my case, all of his is done internally, mine is done externally. So
I know that I have a lot of the intellectual, so I understand what you're saying, because I do a lot of the inner thinking, and it takes me a long time to actually ever say it out loud. I might write it down in a journal and never show anybody. So I do understand that. So that is a difficult divide.
Yeah. But I think sometimes that desire to grow in our relationships does come from having those boundaries, clarifying those expectations, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think for a lot of times that has to do with more modern era issues that maybe didn't always exist, in the past. I mean, I will rephrase that. They did exist, they just weren't vocalized and weren't talked about and conversed. It was just the tension stifled. Exists, but it was stifled. Yeah.
Right, and the divisions in the labor aspect of the marriage were more solidified by the culture and the times than they are now.
Yeah.
It used to be that the women were in charge of taking care of every aspect of cleaning the home and buying the groceries. Well, that's a little more divided there now. And there, you can work out those expectations or what those jobs are a little differently now, because I know from my experience being a homeschool mom, a lot of the times I did the shopping and did all of the household chores. But now that my career is changing and I'm an author and I'm part of this whole house team, sometimes I will say to my husband, I can't go to the store right now. Yeah. Can you stop and here are the things that I need? So those things change,
Yeah. And I think that's one of the change of seasons and the change of all those kinds of things takes strong communication and strong self-awareness. And I think that's probably a missing aspect too. I mean, if you're talking about, we can just spend a lot of our life unaware of what's actually going on inside of us. Yes. And so when you are busy with the house and with children and with outside activities and all these kinds of things, then you're just this haze of fogginess and just misunderstanding of who you actually are.
Right.
And you don't know what to ask for help with because you've not taken time to evaluate what matters, what doesn't matter, what can be dropped off the calendar, what needs to be added for you to do those kinds of things. So there's just so many complexities about it. Right. But I would definitely encourage people to say, okay, what's really going on? What are the unconscious expectations that I'm bringing to these relationships, and learning to release that control? And if
and if
we don't learn to release something,
right. Something's got to give.
Something's got to give.
Something's got to give. Like my dad used to tell me, something's got to give, and it's probably going to be you.
Yeah.
Because he knows how I am. But I think one thing that's a really good practice, and I'm not saying you have to do this. This just helps me. I've done this for years, is I have a Sunday afternoon meeting with myself and God, and I look at my schedule for the week, and I look at what's important to me. And I used to do it all by hand, and now I use like a Google Calendar to schedule things. But in that way, you can think about the things and be proactive before they happen, whether it's menu planning, whether it's writing, whatever it is that's important to you that week, that you make that a priority. Yeah. And that's a way of keeping aware of yourself and what you expect. And for a while there, Jerry and I were having those weekly meetings, especially when we had all those, all of our children at home, and just say, these are the things that are happening this week. These are the things I need you to do. These are the things that I'm going to do. Yeah. And it just helps so much lift that burden and lift that expectation, because what you do about that fog is you get in the middle of your week and you're like, he's got to know that this child needs to be there, or he's got to, and no, they don't know. They're just blindly doing whatever they're doing. And then all of a sudden there's tension because we think, why isn't he reading my mind? And he's not going to, ever.
Yeah, that's definitely a real trap.
Yeah. So, I think we've really gotten into some cool things today. I look forward to having you, Megan, back on the show to do an Enneagram
Definitely.
show.
It's definitely fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah.
And so, just one last thing.
Or not fun. Sometimes.
Not fun. Yeah, sometimes it's not fun.
Can definitely be a little
It's a book of Revelations.
The best
definitely be
the best thing about you is also the worst thing about you.
Yes.
So, just one last question. It's kind of more fun. What is your favorite thing to teach your girls?
Oh, history, without a doubt. I love to talk. And so history provides a little bit more freedom of all the questions and the what do you think and the expounding upon, the number of times I stop mid-sentence or after a paragraph and expound upon something or say, oh, I never knew that. I would not,
Well, that's how our podcasts turn into 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
I love teaching them history. Absolutely, undoubtedly, that is my favorite to teach. So, good stuff.
Well, I've really enjoyed today.
Me too.
Yes, very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so we really, really are excited to bring you this episode. Check back for our next episode, and thanks for joining us here at the Whole House. We're so glad you could join us here for the Whole House podcast. Please subscribe, and if you give us a review, we might pick our favorite and send you a prize. Please remember to like the Whole House Facebook page and follow us on Instagram at _whole_house. And please sign up with your email on our website, thewholehouse.org, to be notified when new things are happening here at the Whole House. Thanks so much for listening.